Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Dave Walker, the co-founder of the Beta SMB Institute, and welcome to our on-demand session today with Bill Weiss, who's the CEO of Boomtime. Hi, Bill.
Howdy.
And Bob Isaac with Isaac
Hello.
Consulting. Both of these gentlemen are founders of the Business Health Council, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I thought, just by way of introduction to our audience, Bill, can you just tell me a little bit about Boomtime and your background and kind of your history in the business to small business space?
Yeah, I've gotten to do a wonderful thing, which has been my whole career building businesses. Started my first one when I was 18, and the success of that let me start an angel fund. And so I got to invest in and work with a number of entrepreneurs. So I've worked in the SMB space for really my whole career. And what we're doing at Boomtime is going after one of my core frustrations, which is how to get marketing at scale. It's a very challenging thing to do. What we do is help small businesses be more effective in their marketing, leveraging a very old school approach, word of mouth, and applying it in a digital age.
Cool. Okay. And Bob, what about you?
Well, I'm a consultant. I've specialized in strategy. Just when the COVID thing hit North American shores, a colleague of mine and I were talking about how is this going to impact our client base, which is small to medium-sized businesses. And we realized that most probably weren't prepared. So we formulated this thing called Business Health Council to develop a guide to help our clients get through not only kind of mobilizing and adapting, but more long-term evolving as a result of COVID. And in fact, one of the things we're talking about today is a result of that, and that's the big 5 trends to watch out for and understand to allow you to better understand how to move forward with your business, how to change your business model.
So do you remember, it's a great intro. Do you remember kind of where you were when it kind of really struck you that, oh boy, it's a
great question. I really do. It was at Starbucks, as a matter of fact. And this is of mine, Steve's his name. So Steve and I were sitting there going, people are opening the doors of Starbucks with their elbows. People aren't ordering food. People are really not communicating very much. It's a very strange experience.
Yeah.
And I turned to Steve and said, this is going to be huge. We need to do something. And within a few days, actually, we put together a team of 11 different people with different areas of expertise that could help us develop this guide. And that's where we started. It was a Starbucks, and it was the last thing I did physically before the shutdown in my region.
Wow.
After that, it was all virtual.
And Bill, what about you? Do you remember where you were? When?
I was at a trade show in downtown Chicago in middle of February. And while we were there at that conference, it hit me that, looking at how things are evolving, this is probably the last trade show I'm going to be at for a long time. We were planning on what we were going to do for the March and April shows that were on the calendar. And my conclusion was, well, we're not going to have to worry about it because we're not going to be able to go.
Wild, absolutely wild. And you guys, and then how did you two connect to really start to work on Business Health Council together? How did that
Well, I was really impressed with what Bob and Steve came up with in creating the Business Health Council. And so I'm kind of a late joiner in helping on the marketing side. Bob and Steve are the ones that created this. And it's really the crisis that we're all facing. Like you can't be in business without having a significant change hitting you because of this crisis.
No question, no doubt. So Bob, before we get into really the 5 meta trends, what were some of the things that you and Steve, your partner Steve, were kind of seeing from clients, seeing from small business, hearing kind of on the street? And Bill, you're welcome to chime in here as well, that really were kind of informing you, is the core group of 11 folks that got together informing you what a response should be?
Well, I think there were 2 things that struck us. One is they just were kind of paralyzed a bit. What do I do now? And the question, and so that was a big question. What do I do now? Like, what now? The other thing I went is, what's next? Because that was a question they weren't asking themselves. And that's the one I thought was a bigger concern is even if you get through it, at the end of it, if you survived, are you going to be able to operate in this, new business arena?
Right.
And I think the answer is for many businesses is still uncertain, because the real crisis isn't just the isolation, but how does the economy and how do business models respond to all this? And that's going to be a couple years coming. And Bill and I have talked about it a number of times. This is not just a few months. This has a long tail.
Yeah, and were your partners, the initial folks that were kind of involved, were they kind of seeing the same thing, and everybody was nodding their heads, but yeah, they don't know what to do and they don't know what they're going to do next?
Yeah, part of the group, IT professional, financial folks, accounting firm, sales, marketing, HR, everybody who pulled in the group kind of had the same reaction. That is, this is big, and our clients are feeling it immediately now, and I don't think they're planning enough going forward, or they don't know how to. So yeah, we all found the same thing, and it really wasn't very difficult to get people to start contributing, content to developing this guide.
And Bill, you have many thousands of small business customers at Boom Time. Were you kind of seeing the same thing happening, taking shape?
Well, on the, our quote legacy business and the retail side, it just went off a cliff. So that got cut in half overnight. And there was an initial pullback on the B2B side, but now we're seeing exactly the opposite, which is a real acceleration. So I think we're starting to see some acceptance of the new context that we're in and how to deal with that. I mean, it's one of the biggest mistakes you can make in a crisis like this is to pull back on your marketing and go dark. And yet so many companies do it, but it is the worst thing you can do.
It's so true. So Bob, I've had a chance to digest and I encourage everybody in the audience to really go to the Business Health Council site and really kind of digest the breadth of offering of resources that you guys have pulled together to help small businesses with a strategic COVID response. But before I ask you to kind of explain what those components are, what were the problems you were observing that you wanted to solve early on, that helped you guide you in what you were creating as a playbook?
Well, the first thing that we did is we sort of try to figure out what the big meta trends are. There are lots of little things happening, but it was the bigger overarching trends that we felt if we got a grip on those, a handle on those, that people were better able to understand the future and how it's going to impact them. And we ended up identifying these 5, I call them meta trends or overarching trends, which really is the 5 trends I think we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So why don't we get into that then? Give me what you think is, let's start with number 1 and kind of pick that apart.
Sure. I don't think these are in necessarily the most important order, but there are a little bit of a logical progression order. I think the first one is protectionism. Things, it used to be that an interconnected world was a fantastic thing, a place for us to sell our goods and services, a place to get goods and services from abroad. And now there's a bit of a movement going, is that a good thing? Maybe I need to be more protective about where I buy my products and services. It's a very political issue, but we are starting to look at, our governments and our businesses are starting to look at the amount of trade we do differently than they have in the past. And I think there is the potential for us to become much more protectionist than we have been in the last 20 years.
And would you classify just the disruption in the supply chain, for instance? We shut down, the United States shut down trade with China. You'd classify that as protectionism, even though it was really driven by kind of health concerns? It wasn't classic protectionism, but certainly had the same result.
It does have the same result. I don't think it's isolated to that. However, if
Mm-hmm.
you look at what's happened with Huawei,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big one in North America. How is that going to transpire? If you look at what China's doing in particular around human rights and how North America is responding, that has an impact. I'm not even taking a position on this. All I'm doing is saying that it it is something in your scenario planning you should factor in. It's out of small businesses' control
Mm-hmm.
of what's going to happen there, but it is going to impact them. And if you haven't thought about it, it could kind of broadside you if you don't look at those scenarios and take into account that it could go a little bit sideways on you. So one of the things we're recommending as a result of this is do scenario planning.
Mm-hmm. Do you subscribe to the theory that the the inverse of protectionism is going to be a significant move to what people are calling onshoring? I actually heard the term home
Yes.
shoring for the first time. Do you think those are going to be kind of meta trends that emerge as well, and the other, kind of as a response?
I do. I actually, if I do agree with that. Onshoring participate is
Mm-hmm.
a is comes out of the idea of protectionism,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that onshoring can be both a good thing or a bad thing depending on which side of it you're on. It
Mm-hmm.
may well be that if you want something across the border and they've onshored it, then you're not going to have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
Alternatively, it may be a good thing because all of a sudden your customers are demanding your products and you're becoming more competitive for either for trade reasons,
Mm-hmm.
trade restriction reasons, or even price reasons. So again, depending on the industry and your position in the industry, it can result in onshoring and be both a good thing or a bad thing for you.
Interesting. And Bill, from your perspective of somebody who serves, again, tens of thousands of small businesses, do you how do you think that small businesses are going to put this in their consideration set, put protectionism into their thinking?
Well, it's definitely affecting the supply chain, but it's so many companies are so intertwined with their supply chain. It's such a challenging thing to fix.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the big questions for this audience is are there things that you can do in your services to small businesses that can help companies deal with uncertainty that is in this area? I mean, this is just a classic example of any offering that provides certainty suddenly becomes enormously appealing.
Enormously uncertain, right?
Right.
No, I think it's an important one to bring forward as really, and it is a kind of a. I agree with you. It is maybe not the highest priority of meta trends, but it's definitely leading into number two, which is what?
The number two is accelerated pace of change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it seems kind of obvious, but if you look at how things are changing now, I don't think we've ever seen it change so rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
The speed with which we've adopted digital and remote working, we've never seen it before. Look how fast we adopted Zoom. We barely knew what it was, and boom, it's done. Now, what's
Here we
interesting
are.
about that is the fact that most major changes in the way we behave in the workplace, there's a lot of change management done around that. And it takes weeks, months, maybe years to change the way the workplace is. And what's happened is COVID has said, hey, that's not required. We're changing literally overnight. My wife is a school teacher, is still a school teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and they shifted from being completely on site with students within 2 weeks to completely offsite and teaching via Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a 2-week change management period. Unbelievably fast. And of course, that's just one example of the many tools we've adapted. There are many, many tools we've adapted. And of course, businesses have pivoted very quickly. That word is becoming a little tired now, but they've pivoted, looking at different products and services they could manufacture. And again, it's a pace of change issue. We've realized that change is something we can adopt and manage much more quickly than we ever have experienced before. And the Business Health Council's premise is that's going to continue. we've learned something, we've been successful, and we're going to continue to do that.
I don't think everything's just popping back at all, right? This will be a long enough time period that new habits are being formed. I mean, I'm very happy that we took our company virtual last summer because we were a step ahead of the game. We didn't have to do it under this forced circumstance. I believe in the future, if you're really going to be competitive for the best talent, you're going to have to support work from anywhere because so many people are now getting accustomed to that. And yeah, absolutely. There are people that want to come back to the office, but it's going to change where the office is, how much time is spent in the office, what you're going to need to do as a company to be able to attract the best talent. I mean, the way I look at it is whatever trends you were tracking in your industry, in your business, where you thought you were going to be 10 years from now, that's happening this year instead.
Right. What do you guys, as leaders, what do you think the appropriate stance or posture is for leadership in any organization to manage this change, to effectively manage this change? Is it fight it? Is it lean into it? Is it be, very selective on what you choose to do and not to do? What does the Business Health Council say is the healthy response?
We don't think you can fight it. Small businesses aren't able to fight it. In fact, even governments perhaps aren't able to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's happened is the adoption curve of or evolution curve of the market for everything has just exponentially gone up.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on a different trajectory than we had before.
Mm-hmm.
I think the easiest thing for all of our clients to do, for the small businesses to do, is to shorten their planning cycle and to be ready and able to, again, to change when the environment changes, which is going to be extremely frequently. So I'm still a big proponent of looking a couple of years out and trying to plan for a couple of years. But I do think every 3 months you should be very seriously, or shorter, depending on your industry, very seriously scrutinizing your strategy and your business model and going, do I need to move? Do I need to move?
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing, the single big thing is shorten your planning cycle. There are a few other things, and I'll let Bill have a chance to talk here, but that's the one big one for me.
No, I think that's a terrific one, an important one.
I think the big opportunity for anybody who serves small businesses is what can you do to help them lean into that change? Because you can't fight it. Large companies can't fight it. Small businesses absolutely can't fight it. So the opportunity is to accept it, lean into it, take advantage of it. There's always huge opportunity when there's a lot of disruption. And your choice is, are you going to be left on the sideline, or are you going to find the opportunity in that disruption and take advantage of it?
Yeah, and I'm personally, I strongly believe that if you really don't lean into this, it will lean into you, and it will, just simply run you over. So
can I build on that just a little bit, Dave and Bill? And that is, one of the things we're really being champions of is innovation teams that go out specifically to look for opportunities in this changing environment. Just before we started recording this session, Dave, you and I were talking about, all these changes. Are they threats or are they opportunities? Well, they are threats if you don't manage them.
Right.
But if you do manage them, if you look at them proactively, wow, this is such a great opportunity for small businesses to look forward using all these digital tools that have never been at their disposal before and provide new goods and services that don't tie them to physical premises. So it's really a great opportunity if you look at it the right way, but you've got to look at it this way. You've got to be a little, forward thinking and have these innovation teams in place to do that. And these don't have to be big teams. They can be quite small.
Yeah, it does. I don't know for you guys, but it does remind me a little bit of Scrum teams. I mean, it reminds me of kind of agile development. It reminds me of just the process we used to build BizHive, the company that I built. And it was rapid test and learn. It was rapid kind of finding of opportunity. It was no harm, no foul kind of attitude towards mistake. It was, it's just it really felt like a startup, and in some ways it feels like we're all a startup again, and we all kind of have to behave accordingly.
Right. In fact, when we developed the guide, we looked at Agile and all the best things out of Agile and pulled those into the guide that we've developed to help small businesses because
Yeah,
we found there was an
it
awful
shows.
lot
It
of,
goes through. It definitely shows
yeah,
through.
it comes through. Thank you. Yeah, good.
So,
Yeah, I think every size company can take lean startup principles and have this quick customer iteration cycle that really drives where you take the company, and you have to do that to adapt.
and not worry too much. Again, another agile principle: not worry too much about having something beyond a minimally viable solution. Don't kill yourself trying to come up with a perfect answer for all small business. Get something out there, learn, see what the response really is great watchwords. So what about,
I think there's a piece of that goes with that that's really important, Dave, which is to over communicate. There's a real tendency to wait until you have all the answers, which is not going to happen in this time period. So both internally with your team members and externally with your customers, it's really important that you've got a cycle of constant communication. You can add to what you said before, but if you wait until you have all the answers, you're just never going to get there. And so you have to over communicate in this time period.
so I'm curious, and I think what people nod their heads and agree with over communications as a strategy, and then when you really look at their stream of communications, you realize that there's a lot not being said, and sometimes it seems more driven by human nature, that they're either embarrassed to talk about not knowing, they're fearful that the reaction is going to be negative, or whatever it is. But how do you lend courage to virtue on the idea of over communications? You've lived it, you're doing it for your organization, Bill, I know. How do you do that as a leader?
Well, I mean, I'm following the data, so you see it from the engagement and the reaction that you create, and so you see it in the results. If you look at, I look at every communication as an iteration to learn from in order to make the next one better, and that is the key: is be willing to accept that you're not going to have all the answers, and you can just see it by going out and looking at the market. So there were a ton of companies that. On the marketing side, for example, continue with the same exact messaging into March, into April, when we were deep into this crisis. I'm getting the same. So I love Tommy Bahama shirts. I'm getting the same emails from them every single day, as if nothing in the world has changed. It just comes off as tone deaf. So if you're doing it in the context of communicating to your audience, really, really living it from their perspective. And that's for your clients, and that's for your employees. Then your communication is going to be genuine, and it's going to be very effective.
That's great. That's terrific. Let's talk about we're on number 3 or number 4?
3. Yes,
3.
Going to 3.
So why don't you give us some insights into Metatrend number 3?
Metatrend number 3 is acceleration of automation in industry and in white collar professions. And what that means is, what is it that I can do to reduce my labor content, to improve my labor efficiency, to allow my labor that I'm now working offsite to control things onsite elsewhere. And so we've seen it happening already, but now that we've, as individuals, business leaders, recognize that it's a vulnerability, we are accelerating our interest in automation.
Okay. And is it driven from the legacy of being, frankly, too complicated and not automated enough? I mean, is it one of those meta trends that really is emerging because we're all getting pulled into it, where we have to do it, and it's about time that we did it? And I guess the example I'll use is telehealth, where technology's been there forever. I mean, it's not like it suddenly was invented yesterday, but it took the crisis to pull the whole ecosystem into being automated.
Yes, the crisis is a catalyst. This probably would have happened anyways, but the accelerated pace of change, it's the crisis is just a huge catalyst for this, and it's just taking it and happening. It's making things happen in months that we would have probably expected to see happen in years. So I don't think it's changing the direction. It's just changing the adoption curve and making it much steeper.
And Bill, again, from your perspective of, of serving small businesses, we all know that small businesses have been behind the curve as far as adoption of technologies and automation and embrace of really what's at their fingertips. Do you see them really adopting the automation that they really need to survive, if not thrive, going forward?
Well, this is one of the silver linings, is it is that catalyst. It forces you to reevaluate these things. I mean, there's a number of members of the Institute that really do exactly this, which is to help small businesses put automation into place so that they can be consistently communicating with their clients, so that they can be staying in front of their audience all the time. And for a small business, it's really tough to do that effectively if you don't implement those kinds of tools. And I love the telehealth example because it's the ideal. Like, my experience with using telehealth is much better than the old alternative, right? I would always.
I agree.
So anytime you can put in an automation that creates a better customer experience and improves the delivery and creates cost savings within the company. But even when it's that obvious, like, it took this crisis in order for us to start using telehealth. And I see the same exact thing within our small businesses. Professional services is a great example. That's it's a market that tends to be conservative in the adoption. I do a lot of work in legal, which is particularly true. Adoption of automation, and yet this forcing function is having a very positive effect in regards to updating the competitive nature of where these firms are relative to the other options out there in the market.
Yeah, I think in the cumulative body of hopefully a lot of the content for the Leaders Forum, people will really actually be maybe pleasantly surprised that it isn't as bad as they think it is, that really there is a silver lining, and that is the urgency with which the collective customer base is saying, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, and they're moving on it. They're absolutely adopting it and trying to get into things that heretofore they haven't. So I think that's automation and adoption of automation, I think has been historically a frustration in the small business space. But I'm hopeful, along with you guys, that this really is the catalyst that'll drive a lot of them towards that. So meta trend number 4.
Okay, meta trend number 4 is accelerated. This is not really, this should be sort of obvious, but it's the accelerated growth of digital in retail, fulfillment, online sales, and logistics. Again, it's happening already, but the pace of change is what's truly momentous and unprecedented. It's the pace of adoption of those technologies. Again, the curve is just ramped up so unbelievably quickly.
Unpack for me a little bit. One of the observations that you made in your COVID response was I thought was really important, and that was, it's not just about digital migration. It's actually about meeting the customer experience expectations that consumers have of a newfound digital capability from small businesses. Can you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. The buyer journey is changing. So if you look at, you need to look at how your customers buy things and how they used to and how they want to in the future. And it has shifted. Trade shows Bill mentioned earlier is a perfect example of that. They're not happening. So what's replacing that? It's going to be something digital. Dave, you've shifted. This whole thing we're doing now is a result of this. I don't know if this was a direction for your business, but look where you're at. You're a perfect example. Maybe I should turn it back to you and say, as the leader of your group, how has it impacted you, and how have you accelerated your pace of adoption?
Well, what I've told everyone is this was certainly not the plan.
Right.
Not at all the plan. And I would describe myself as someone who would be dragged kicking and screaming into doing 100% virtual events, thinking that's a death sentence. That's an admission of failure. Let's go to Napa. But I also think that what I've learned to the positive has been really surprising. Now, really, the challenge day by day is building that customer experience. So I can testify as a business that the number one thing I'm focused on right now is meeting the expectations of my customers in what they expect our institute and what our events to be ultimately. And I have to imagine that's what a lot of small businesses are going through. I mean, Bill, kind of along these lines, obviously your area of subject matter expertise is word of mouth marketing. So how, I'm curious as to how this new demand of customer experience is really kind of impacting how word of mouth marketing works for small businesses. Is it?
Well, it's been absolutely amazing. So if you look at LinkedIn, for example, which has just been on a tear, the growth the last 2 years before this crisis, and then suddenly the pandemic hits and engagement goes up 55% overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Which means this perfect audience. So if you're selling B2B, then everybody you want to talk to is sitting there in one place in LinkedIn.
Right.
You know, it's the ideal networking event because you get to only meet the people you want to. You don't have to eat horrible food while you're doing it. And so you can build the perfect network. So if whatever effort you're putting into LinkedIn, you should put 10x that effort in because
Mm-hmm.
the results from it are absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is it? It's just word of mouth on steroids. You still have to do all the same basics. You still have to have a great customer experience, deliver for your clients. You have to have referrals already happening.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've done all that hard work, then your ability to amplify that effect, because we're all digitally connected and we're all spending so much more time online and paying so much more attention, it is the ideal time period for this approach.
I just couldn't agree more. So let's do meta trend number 5.
Number 5 is acquisitions and consolidation. And that really, there are going to be winners and losers. We know that. There are going to be people that look ahead and change their business model, and there are people that are going to simply try to survive, and they may not survive. The result is that there are going to be acquisitions of the winners, and the losers are going to fall to the marketplace. In addition, those people that adopt some of the things we talked about earlier, the digitization, the automation, there are going to be greater economies of scale. And the result is those companies are going to look to acquire other companies that they think are in the right space. So we see an increase in the number of acquisitions and consolidations from a very strategic point of view, not just a return on an investment, but strategic acquisitions and consolidations.
And what do you think is going to drive that strategery? What do you think are going to be the elements that really are going to, what makes a good strategic acquisition?
Well, I think that one of the things that's going to happen, and it kind of comes out a little bit of some of the other trends from we talked about earlier, but people are going to start looking at their business. I should say business leaders are going to start looking at their businesses differently than they have before.
Mm-hmm.
When your staff can operate a plant remotely, you think of that business differently. Mm-hmm. When you can control your value chain differently, and you offer different components of your value chain digitally when you have before, your value chain changes and your business model changes. So what's happening is we're going to look at how we evaluate and put a value on businesses with respect to where they deliver in the value chain. And those companies that can leverage that and provide better value more efficiently as a result of some of these things that we're talking about, those are the ones that'll get acquired.
Mm-hmm. And Bill, from your perspective, I mean, the MarTech space in B2B and B2SMB is, to put it mildly, crowded. Do you see consolidation happening in that particular sector, basically?
The short answer is yes, but I think there's a really key factor behind that really adds to what you were saying, Bob, which is the whole reason we have a business of creating startups and growing them and selling them is because traditionally large companies are not good at innovation. Mm-hmm. That's changing. There are plenty of companies that are tackling the innovator's dilemma and getting much better at it. But when you have this kind of crisis and the kind of innovation that's required, that's going to drive the kind of strategic acquisitions that you're talking about. And that's absolutely going to happen in the MarTech space. And the same thing is going to happen that's occurring in every space, which is this is like the perfect storm of the mixture to actually create really incredible, strong companies, because we have a recession, which has long been the source of creating really great companies, because it enforces a focus. That's exactly what you have to do to create a great company. It gets rid of the weak players, which means you have more opportunity if you have the persistence and the ability to make it through this. And at the same time, we have this massive acceleration of the pace of change, which that creates all of that opportunity. So you put those two things together, you're going to see a lot of incredible companies come out of this time period. And same thing is going to happen as always happens, which is the most successful, largest companies are going to acquire them in order to capture that innovation.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I was going to say, that's really well said, Bill. That's perfectly put. I'm completely with you on that one. Very, very well done.
I mean, I was just simply going to observe back to you, Bob, that you know, I think meta trend number 3, the speed at which things are happening really force frankly an acquisition stance of I can't afford the time to build it. And I mean, it uses an example of Verizon's recent acquisition of Blue Jeans, which was like, sure, we could build it. We've got more engineers than Google does. We could build that, and you know, but the time and the effort and the energy required to build it is just there's no point. There really is no point. The market will have completely moved in months, not years, but in months. We better get on it and get positioned.
I would dare say that almost every industry that we can think of, there are going to be winners, and both from a standpoint of companies that get larger, but also from the standpoint of companies that get acquired for a great valuation as a result of this. It's impacting every industry.
I'm not sure this is I'd kind of like you to talk about consolidation and or acquisition or variations thereof in the small business space. And I mean it in the sense that it seems like the press about small businesses right now describes kind of complete winners or complete losers, as in like you're shutting down, you're going out, you're never coming back. Your whole category, in fact, isn't coming back. Just kiss it goodbye. You're never going to work in restaurants again because there will be no restaurants. I guess I would like you to talk about, do you envision that consolidation and acquisition, while we're very familiar with it at an enterprise level, does that live, is something like that live down at a small business level?
Well, I think to Bill's point earlier, innovation happens at the small business level, and everyone participating in your event potentially could be innovating and should be innovating and thinking about where their industry is going. I don't think that industries are going to disappear. I simply think they're going to change the way they deliver their goods and services.
Right.
Do I think restaurants are going to disappear? Maybe a little bit in the way we consume food in restaurants, but we're seeing already, Uber Eats is changing the way we consume that food. It's in our homes. The other piece, if you look at restaurants, is we're eating more on patios. At least in my region, we are. Now, when it gets colder, that's not going to happen. I think it'll morph again. But the concept of food being prepared, that me consuming food that I don't prepare, that's going to be around forever. It's just going to be different.
Right.
And that's kind of the most blatant example, but I think it applies to almost every industry. We're not doing away with anything. We're just changing the way it's delivered to me or you, and the way maybe that we consume it.
We are going to see a lot of disruption. Like if you look at restaurants in New York after 9/11, I won't get the numbers exactly right, but a huge percentage, 70-80% of them went out of business after 9/11. But 3 or 4 years later, there were 25% more restaurants in New York than there were pre-9/11. So the industry is going to adapt and survive, but it's going to change, and there's going to be a lot of disruption. And this is an area that private equity actually can be a really beneficial element, because if you've built a reasonable business, even if you're running into challenges now, if you sort of hit that 5 to 10 million revenue number, there are sources of capital that even if it's not the exit you were looking for, are going to help transform that business into where it's going. So we're going to see a lot of unique roll-ups, acquisitions of distressed companies that really hasn't even started yet, because we're all kind of in this holding pattern right now. Frankly, we haven't hit the real pain yet. The real pain is going to come Q4 this year, Q1 of next year, because that's when the reality is going to set in, and the companies that were just sort of holding on are going to really start to hit the true challenges.
Yeah, Bill and I have been talking about that quite a bit. Is, how long is this going to take place, and how long is the tail? And we've been talking years and not months.
I wish I had a lot of facts that I could quote you to disagree, but I really kind of sort of agree with you. It's there's no sign, at least, that this is something that at a minimum will be uncertain. And in worst case scenario, really will be pretty bad, and we'll have to all of us develop resilience. And that's one of our themes here is really, okay, there's recovery, but recovery without resilience is really not a sustainable kind of way in which to recover. So,
but I do want to add, and we hit on it earlier, it's not all bad news.
Right.
If you lean, as you use the words lean in, Dave, if you lean in, if you look at these meta trends, if you lean into them and start analyzing where your industry is going and how it could change, there's huge opportunity that is really open to small business. Again, as Bill talked about earlier, they're the drivers of change. So it really isn't just a bleak scenario. It's quite a bright scenario for an awful lot of individuals and companies that want to lean in and embrace it.
Well,
it's hard work. It's hard work.
It is. It's very hard work. But I appreciate you starting the hard work and starting the hard work of the Business Health Council, which again, I strongly encourage everybody to check out. Summarize again for us just the real quickly the 5 meta trends.
Okay, so meta trend number 1 is protectionism, and that is the concept that governments, nations, continents are going to more and more potentially shut the movement of goods, either for health reasons or political reasons. And that we should think about scenarios of how that could manifest itself and to what degree. Number 2 is accelerated pace of change. We've seen that with respect to the adoption of Zoom, for example, how fast we adopt things where historically there was a big change process involved. We've understood, we've seen that humans are pretty resilient, and businesses are too. We can accept a change more rapidly than we've ever seen historically. Number 3 is accelerated pace of automation, and that's both in industry, hard manufacturing, but it's also in professional services. And that is trying to move away from a dependence on labor, become more efficient, and to be able to operate with individuals remote. So you have a smaller footprint at the physical premises if it's a manufacturer, for example. Number 4 is accelerate growth in digital, retail, fulfillment, and online services and sales and logistics. Again, this is not new. It's just, I guess it could go this way, so that your viewers can see sort of the standard curve direction, but it's gonna hockey stick upward. That we have seen already a little bit, but the pace of change, the pace of acceleration is rapidly faster than it was before. And as a result, what's going to happen is it changes the way leaders build their business, the way acquirers value the business, and it's going to change the strategic perspective that acquirers have on business and who they want to acquire. The 5th change, which kind of feeds off of that, is there is going to be an increase of acquisitions and consolidations in some industries And I don't know which ones yet because there's a lot of things happening,
Mm-hmm.
but it is going to happen. I would dare say that most industries will be affected in some ways by acquisitions and consolidations. There are going to be some winners, there are going to be some losers. Let's hope the audience here are all winners. And as a result, they'll either be acquirers or acquirees at great valuations.
Terrific, terrific work, guys. I mean, it's again, so helpful, and I hope it's something that, you know, forms the basis of dialogue around many executive committee tables as so many leaders struggle with, you know, what does the plan actually look like, and what do we need to consider in forming that plan. Any final thoughts from either one of you guys? Any words of inspiration? Are we going to actually have an NBA season?
Well, first of all, I really hope so. I'm from Toronto. The Raptors are doing pretty good. I want to see them, you know, do it a second time.
I wanted to give you that opportunity. I know where you're.
Thank you, Dave. Very kind of you. On a more serious front is, I don't think you can start too soon. I'm encouraging all my clients to don't wait. Do it now. Start thinking of these things now. If you wait, someone will have already beat you to the punch. Get going today. Do it.
Yep, agreed. Bill, how about you?
Well, I see way too many businesses that have taken the approach of, well, we're just going to hang on and get to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not admitting the huge amount of change that's going to exist on the other side. And yet, if you change your perspective, and I love how you talk about leaning into it, and you take advantage of that opportunity. This is actually an amazing time to be in business. It's an amazing time to be an entrepreneur. It's an amazing time to be running a significant company that can have an impact with your small business clients. You have to lean into it.
Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, I think, I hope, again, everyone takes those words to heart, because I think they really, you know, form the basis for real resilience, is to have that hope and to have that passion to kind of drive forward optimistically, recognizing the opportunities. So thank you again, both, very, very much. And we look forward to doing this again sometime, as we all go through this journey together over the next.
Thank you for giving Bill and I an opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, and just as a final point, we'll obviously have your contact information on the agenda. Neither of you mind if some of our audience members potentially reach out to you to just ask questions?
Absolutely.
Or to, you know, explore partnership opportunities, engagement with the Business Health Council. I'm sure that you probably find, hopefully, several hands raised saying, "Hey, that sounds like a really great idea. I'd love to help."
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific. All right, guys, thank you very, very much, and look forward to doing this again.
Thank you, Dave.
Take care.